Welcome to Mad on Books, where I talk about fantasy mostly, science fiction sometimes, and comics occasionally. November was a really big month for me. Apart from being back on YouTube for a couple months, I was exhibiting extremely low impulse control. So I've got a really big haul in this video. There are chapters. It's going to be a long video. So there's a what I read, there's a book and other things haul, there's a little bit about the channel itself and how it's coming along. There's a Fitz feature by popular demand. My new cat is taking over my channel, and some other stuff, things I watched, video games I played, that kind of thing. To avoid making this video any longer than it needs to be, let's get on with it. The star of the show is what I read. And to be honest, I didn't hit any really high numbers as far as books, which is totally fine with me because I'm not in it for the numbers, I'm in it for the quality. And it was a very high quality month of reading. First of all, I read or finished Fool's Errand, the first book in the 20-man trilogy. If you don't know Robin Hobb and the Realm of the Elderlings, really quickly, Realm of the Elderlings is a 16-book series. It's broken up into a number of trilogies and one tetralogy, and this is the third trilogy. The first trilogy, Farseer, is first person and primarily concerned with the narrator, Fitz Chivalry Farseer, and the second trilogy sort of skips into a different place in the world, totally different characters, third person, and jumping around perspectives all the time, like a lot of series we're used to. The 20-man trilogy gets us back to Fitz, and boy was it welcome. I am a huge Fitz stan. I named my extremely adorable cat after Fitz. I was so happy to get back to Fitz. The first 200 pages of this book, maybe more, maybe 250 pages, is people sitting and drinking, mostly brandy, and talking. And if that sounds boring to you, you do not know Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is the hands-down best character writer in fantasy, if you ask me. And just getting back to these characters, catching up with them, hearing what they've been up to, getting back into their frustrating but fascinating personalities was a real joy and a treat. I loved this. It's a reread, so I loved it again. Then I resisted the urge to just plow ahead with the 20-man trilogy and gave myself a brief intermission between books. Namely, I picked up this, which doesn't look like a brief intermission. However, this is 1,200 pages, and it has 10 books in it. So it's a bind-up of a complete series called The Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. It's Zelazny's best known, I think, probably, series. And it makes me a little bit sad that Roger Zelazny doesn't really get much love these days. He was writing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s primarily, and has been a little bit forgotten, feels like to me. So I like the idea of getting back to him, and I've wanted to reread Amber. I've read it 2 or 3 times already, but I wanted to get back to it. It's a fascinating idea as far as world building goes, and has been extremely influential. If you know the deck of dragons in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, heavily inspired by this, I would say. George R. R. Martin has also said that this and Zelazny in general were very influential to him. Many authors were heavily influenced by Zelazny. It's an interesting idea. There are infinite dimensions, and at one end of the dimensional spectrum is Amber, which is the most real, most static place, and at the other end is chaos. And in between are infinite numbers of dimensions called shadows, which reflect more or less Amber or chaos. The main character, it's a first-person narrative. A lot of people hate that. I don't understand, but a lot of people seem to. The main character, Corwin, is narrating the story, and he is a prince of the royal family of Amber. And he's basically, at least in the first book, which is called Nine Princes in Amber, and constitutes this much of this book, he is warring against his brother who has claimed the throne in their father's absence. And I really enjoyed it. And it's a super easy read. Slipping one Amber book in between anything is very simple because it was 120 pages, I think, the first book. And took me just a weekend. Not even a full weekend. So slipped that in between Fool's Errand and The Golden Fool. The Golden Fool being the second book in the 20-man trilogy. Just as good. Everything I said about the first one, I would say about this one as well. It gets a bit more into the intrigue and the politics going on in the royal court. And it sets up the beginning of a quest kind of adventure, which is coming up in the third book. Excellent stuff. If you haven't read Robin Hobb, don't start here. Go back to the Farseer trilogy and start there. But if you haven't read Robin Hobb, what are you waiting for? Before I actually finished The Golden Fool, I had an emergency reading engagement. That sounds very dramatic, doesn't it? Tori Tekken, otherwise known as Tori Talks, she has her own booktube channel. She is also an author, and she sent me an e-arc. Actually, she asked me the stupid question whether I would want an e-arc or not, and I've been excited about her new book coming out for months. So of course I said yes, and she sent it to me. It is The Bloodstones, which is the first in a trilogy called Legends of the Bruhai. I did a review of this. You can see it up there. And it's really good. That's all I'll really say because I've already talked about it, gushed about it quite a lot. I also did an interview with Tori. If you look in the live section of my channel, you'll find that there. I have so many questions. There are so many things I'm looking forward to reading in the second book. This just came out on November 28th, so you can get it in paperback and ebook. And they're working on an audio book, but not exactly sure when that's going to be out. And last but not least, I went back to Middle-earth. It is so good to be back in Middle-earth. I have done a vlog about this. I've talked a lot about Lord of the Rings recently, specifically the first half of Fellowship of the Ring. I was surprised at how much I tabbed this. I don't know if you can see that, but I tabbed the hell out of this. It's super interesting, having read it many times, having seen the movies many times, and now being very aware of there being quite a few people who are into fantasy and have been into fantasy for a long time who haven't read these books, which is crazy to me. But I've been kind of going through it with my thoughts as I go with the vlog, trying to maybe introduce it to someone who has seen the movies but not read the books. And I've really been enjoying it. I've been enjoying vlogging. It slows my reading down quite a lot because instead of getting a healthy flow going where I'm just like racing through 8 chapters at a time, I read a chapter, I stop and think about it, I record a couple of thoughts, or I interrupt myself in the middle of a chapter to record an urgent thought. And it's also very time consuming putting all of those videos together and creating a vlog video out of them. But I'm really enjoying it. So I'm definitely going to keep going on that. And I'm into the second half of the Fellowship of the Ring now. After the Fellowship of the Ring, I'll probably take a break and maybe go back to Realm of the Earthlings or something else. I'm not sure. I'm trying really hard. It's such a habit, but I'm trying really hard not to make concrete reading plans. So you can support me in that by not inviting me to read anything along with you. People keep doing that and I keep getting excited and thinking, I'm going to hold back. I'm going to hold back on making a concrete commitment to anything like that and just read what I feel like it when I feel like it. This will no doubt be the longest part of this video, but if you are a fan of book hauls, you are in luck. But before we get to the books, I have an important purchase to share with you. Apparently, Aragorn was a little short on cash, so he sold me Underil, his sword. But all kidding aside, this is a replica by United Cutlery. They're the official movie replica people. It's apparently exactly the sword that Viggo Mortensen was using. As soon as I got this, I thought, wow, Viggo Mortensen must have wrists like tree trunks. This is really heavy. Swinging this around, I mean, holding it up with one hand is not that big a deal, but swinging it around is a little bit of a workout. It's actually a really heavy sword. I cannot get all of it in the picture, but if I move it back and forth like this, maybe you can see. It's really long and it's solid steel. It's not sharpened, so that's why I'm handling it the way I am. It is extremely cool. And from now on, my videos where I'm sitting at my desk with the huge bookshelf behind me, this will be the sword on the wall, not Name Taker, my sword that I made myself. Cool detail. If you can see the engraving on the blade all the way along, there are runes engraved on it which say, I am Anduril, who was Narsil, sword of Elendil. Thralls of Mordor flee me. Is that not badass? A sword naming itself, I am, and then warning its foes to get away. Very, very cool purchase, which I've wanted for a really long time. I won't say much about these, just to mention that I did purchase extremely low self-control month, as I said. I did purchase 4 Folio Society editions, Something Wicked This Way Comes, The Princess Bride, and Dune Messiah. They are gorgeous. I already did a video on them. Check that out. But that's it for those. Just I am in love and very happy I got them. Going from extremely expensive, fancy editions to self-pub. I think self-pub authors really should get as much credit as they actually deserve, which is quite a lot in many cases. And these were free because authors are awesome and want to promote their books. So they send them to people like me. Vaughan Roycroft's second book, Bold Ascension, which is the sequel to The Severing Sun, he sent this to me. Thank you very much, Vaughan. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I read and reviewed the first book, and I especially love the John DiGiovanni covers. He didn't do the whole design, but he did the painting, the illustration for the cover. And they are wraparounds, which is the best kind of cover. And I love the style. It's very illustrative, so it's an illustration. It's not abstract or something, but it's also vague enough that there are a lot of details that your imagination can fill in, which I think is pretty cool. Thank you, Vaughan. And Joe Byrne, who you may have seen on the Sunday Pub last week, he sent me 3 books. He actually sent me Wistful Ascending, which is the first in the Hybrid Helix series. It's a book he sent me a long time ago, actually months ago, an audiobook, which I listened to and quite liked, but there were a number of things I wasn't that crazy about. And he and I were having a conversation about maybe some of that was because I was listening, which I'm not really that used to, as opposed to actually reading it on the page. And I was curious to read it on the page. So he said, I'll send it to you. And he sent me the second one in the Hybrid Helix, Return of the Griffin. And he sent me the first one in his new series. This is Partial Function, which I think the series is called Infinity Bagua Technique. I'm not sure. But that one also sounds interesting. I can't say much about it. I haven't read it. Let's see. I'll read just the beginning of the back. Akina Azure, the Spiral Witch, Monster Hunter, Grand Master of Infinity Bagua and owner of the most powerful weapon in the martial world, has retired to a peaceful life in the South. That's just the beginning of the blurb. I'm guessing that retiring to a peaceful life in the South will not last. Another gift. My friend Evie from the channel She Was Only Evie sent me a book. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure I know that this book was just a consolation prize because what she was really sending me was a whole bunch of toys for my new cat Fitz. And so that I wouldn't feel bad, she sent me The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. I got The Spear Cuts Through Water from her last Christmas. I read it. I loved it. I reviewed it. Check that review out. It is an amazing book. Probably my book of the year. And just to make sure I didn't feel left out when I got a package of cat toys, Evie sent me the first book of Simon Jimenez, not related book. This is science fiction. Spear Cuts Through Water is not, but same author. This was their first book, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. Thank you, Evie. While reading Lord of the Rings, and I mentioned this in my vlog video for the first half of Fellowship of the Ring, I was talking to various people, and it turns out a lot of people really hate Tom Bombadil. And I think my theory is that that's because they don't understand Tom Bombadil. So I already essentially promised, in my vlog video to do a Tom Bombadil character video, just focused on good old Tom. And then I started looking a little further and became more aware of things that I was only vaguely aware of before. Tom Bombadil comes from a story, which is actually a poem, which was published before Lord of the Rings. And this is it. A cute little edition with a couple other stories in it. The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. And it doesn't really directly connect to Middle-earth, as far as I understand. But this was Tom before Lord of the Rings. So I'm really interested to read that. It will make very good research material for the Tom video. And just because I want to eventually have a complete Tolkien slipcase deluxe edition collection, I got Tales from the Perilous Realm. And this is, as you can see, shiny slipcase design, same design on the cover, very nice. And it's got that story, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, but it also has a couple others. So it's got Rover Random, Farmer Giles of Ham, Smith of Wootton Major, Leaf by Niggle, and an essay by Tolkien called On Fairy Stories, all collected in here. And, of course, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil in a sweet little slipcase. Allow me to tell you a little story. When I was 18, now imagine, close your eyes and imagine this. I was 18 on my 18th birthday. My lovely girlfriend, hello Rebecca if you're watching, she sat me down at my birthday party, told me to close my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, I saw this. It was a large print of the cover by Michael Whelan, signed by Michael Whelan and numbered, which was pretty amazing. So, of course, I had to eventually buy this. I bought the first of these. These are new bind-ups of the Elric stories. I read the Elric stories when I was a teenager, and much like Amber, they were all in finger-thin paperbacks. This is the second and third of the bind-ups of the Elric stories, putting them all into hardbacks. Now I have all three. There's one more, which is a new story that he wrote recently, which I've actually heard is kind of garbage, so I probably won't be buying it. So I essentially have all of the Elric, pretty much all of the Elric now, and we'll be rereading these, maybe much like Amber, slipping them in between other chunkier things. This is a book that has been on my I should probably read it list for probably 2 decades. It's a legendary book called Legend by David Gemmell, and it's so weird to me that this has slipped past me all of my life because it's been around for a very long time. I've read a lot of really old fantasy. I've read a lot of the old classic fantasy stories, and this is meant to be one of them. Doesn't seem too big, so I'm sure I can slip it in somewhere not too far in the future. And from everything I've heard, I'm really looking forward to it. This is an outlier. on a channel that primarily talks about fantasy and science fiction and occasionally comics. Peter Carey is an author that if you're primarily into fantasy and science fiction, you might not have ever heard of. He's an Australian author. He is one of very few people who has won the Booker Prize twice. There are 2 movies based on his novels. And I love his stuff, and I want to reread some of his stuff. I read most of what he had published, at least maybe 10 years ago. I had read, I think, all of what he had published. A lot of his stories are set in Australia. A lot of them are in historical periods of Australia. They're not historical novels. They're not about the history. They're just set in those periods. And he's such a good writer. It's sort of, not all of them are magical realism, but a lot of his stuff there's a magical realism kind of vibe to them. This one is My Life as a Fake, which I've read before. It's gorgeous. It's set in Melbourne in the late 1940s. A young poet named Christopher Chubb decides to teach his country a lesson about pretension and authenticity. But over the ensuing years, his audacious act of literary ventriloquism takes on a much darker resonance. Fleeing Melbourne for the seedy, sweaty streets of Kuala Lumpur, Chubb will find himself, just as Frankenstein was, haunted and pursued by his own creation. It's a good book. I've read it before. There are a number of novels in these formats now with covers that nicely go together. I will probably be collecting all of these relatively soon, just like I did with the Paul Austers. So maybe I'll mention them on the channel in the near future. We'll see. Last but not least, it's manga time. I kind of stalled on Vinland Saga a while ago, and I've been looking at other things like One Piece and so on. A lot of manga, I just can't get over the silliness. Yeah, you've got a story that feels like it should be relatively serious, and then you've got these characters whose heads almost fold in half because they've got these huge mouths just because it's funny. I guess it's a very Japanese cultural thing, which I just don't really get or enjoy very much. But that reminded me of a manga that I read back in the 90s called Lone Wolf and Cub. If you want to know where The Mandalorian came from, it's Lone Wolf and Cub. It's a Ronin who is running around essentially functioning as an assassin, and he's always traveling with his baby, his son, in a baby carriage. And it's much more realistic looking than a lot of things that you might have seen in manga otherwise. And it doesn't have the super over-the-top silly mood or the super over-the-top expressions. The visual style is quite realistic. And I really enjoyed it. And it's published in these omnibus editions, which are actually reorganized. So they read like English books. They read from what we would consider the front cover to the back cover, top left to bottom right. You don't have to adjust your reading and start at what we would consider the back and that kind of thing, because they were translated and brought into the West back in the 80s and 90s, where I don't think anyone was used to manga yet. So there are many of these, quite a few of these chunky omnibuses. And I'm going to be collecting them over time because I know that they're good, and I love a good Western, and samurai stories are where the Westerns came from. Okay, I said last but not least manga, but last but not least, on Etsy, I totally coincidentally found a guy who is making Malazan pottery. Have a look at that. Hopefully it's focused. This is a Bridge Burners mug. It's got the Bridge Burners sort of symbol, says first in, last out, Bridge Burners. I just loved it as soon as I saw it. I had the guy send me this and a couple of t-shirts. He's got a Bridge Burners and a Bone Hunters t-shirt, which you will no doubt be seeing in my videos in the future. A few quick things about the channel. In November, the channel passed 1,500 subs, which is cool. I am constantly kind of surprised when I look at the numbers. I guess I just haven't gotten used to it yet. When I started this channel, of course, there was nobody, and I didn't expect that there would be 1,500 somebodies and growing. And I really appreciate it. Thank you, viewer. If you are not subscribed, why don't you do that? I would appreciate it. It just keeps going. And I try, honestly, to not think too much about the numbers. But I was thinking maybe a goal of 3,000 by the end of 2024 would be something I could achieve or would like to achieve. I shot myself in the foot by disappearing for 5 months, obviously. You can see on my stats that it's like flatline. And now it's bouncing again. It's just so satisfying that this, which I do basically just because I think it's fun and I like talking to people about books, that there are actually people out there who want to watch it. I am totally touched and humbled by that. Thank you. The other thing that's been going really well in November is the Sunday pub. So every Sunday, 9 o'clock Berlin time, I start a live chat. And that live chat can be joined by anyone. That doesn't mean you can just watch and join in the comments. You can also join on screen if you would like to. It's been going better than I had expected. I go into it every Sunday just sort of with the mindset, if I'm the only person there, that's fine. If I'm the only one on screen, I don't mind. I will talk to the people in the comments and just see how it goes. But that hasn't happened once yet. There have been authors like Joe Byrne. There have been other booktubers like Dan from the Black and Blue Collar Reader and Tori from Tori Talks, and just a bunch of different people. Christopher Navo has joined. I'm leaving out a bunch of people because every time it's been 4 or 5 other people have joined me, and we have just had a blast. I've usually got a glass of wine or a beer because it's late here, and we just chat about whatever the hell we want. Sometimes maybe it'll be sprints. And if you're interested in that, go to the Grimoire Discord. The link is down in the description. And join the Grimoire Discord and go to the Mad on Books channel. I post the join on-screen link and the watch and comment link every Friday or Saturday. And everyone is welcome to join. You don't have to be a booktuber. You don't have to be anyone anyone's ever heard of before. You can just be yourself. We've had Jerome from My Comments has joined. Vero from My Comments has joined. We've had people who aren't visible on screen usually who were brave enough to join, and that was really, really cool. That was actually probably the coolest thing about it so far. Lastly, I would say I've mentioned that I've been doing the Lord of the Rings vlog at the end of every physical book. So at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, I'm doing a chat. It's going to be a live chat with Philip Chase, AP Canavan, and Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. We're all of a similar age. We are all old school, long time Lord of the Rings fans, and we are probably just going to gush for a couple of hours. If you're interested in watching that, it'll be on Sunday, December 9th at 11 in the morning, East Coast America time, which is probably the largest common denominator for most of my viewers, I think. I promised a Fitz feature. When I got a cat, pretty much half of the comments in all of my videos since I got a cat have been about my cat. So it seems like Fitz, my cat, is more popular than me on my channel, which is understandable because she is the cutest cat on BookTube. And she pretty much insists on being in all of my videos, whether I like it or not. Very, very common for her to photobomb me behind me. Evie, thank you, Evie, sent Fitz a whole bunch of cat toys, most of which were drugged with catnip. So Fitz has a banana that she is in love with because it's full of catnip. She has some little squishy mice, plush toy kind of things that she's in love with because they're full of catnip. The funny thing is she has 0 fucks to give about ball toys. Yeah. Thanks anyway for the balls as well, Evie. Fitz theoretically appreciates them, but they don't have catnip in them, so I watched a couple of really good things in November, one of which you have to promise me you will also watch because it's fucking awesome. Blue Eye Samurai on Netflix. It is anime, but not fully traditional anime. It's a real interesting, visually interesting mix between 3D and 2D animation. But the main thing is the story. The main character is a woman pretending to be a man. She is a master swordsman. She is half white, half Japanese. The whole thing takes place in the Edo period. So she is something like a ronin, a samurai without a master. And she has blue eyes because she is half white. There are 4 white men who are doing business in Japan, although white people in Japan in the period are completely banned. And she is on a quest of revenge to kill all 4 of them because one of them is surely her father. It's really good. I can only strongly recommend that you watch it. I guess not everybody would love it, but I totally loved it. I binged it twice in pretty quick succession, and I will definitely watch it again. The other thing I really enjoyed was Loki. I won't get into any spoilers. There's been a lot of discussion online about how it relates to the comics and whatever. I don't read the comics. I'm not that interested in Loki in the comics or Thor or any of that sort of stuff. So I have nothing to do with any of that. I thought it was amazing because of how it looked. It almost looked like a Wes Anderson film and reminded me a lot of Simon Stalenhag, who I did a video about, his illustration style, his painting style. Most of the recent season, I was thinking, you could do the story with anyone. It doesn't really need to be Loki. But of course, the finale very much needs to be Loki. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. But even with anybody, whether it was Loki or not, whether it really depends on Loki or not, I thought the story was quite well done. I thought it was bizarre and interesting. I thought it was visually stunning, and I really enjoyed it. Recent video games. I have not played nearly as much recently because I've been back into doing videos and reading, but I did play Spider-Man 2 a bit, and I can say it's New York minigames. Kind of. I've never encountered so many mini games in one game. It's kind of crazy. Most of the mini games are kind of fun, and it doesn't matter. It does have a story, but just like the first Spider-Man game, the main thing it's about is swinging around New York. It's got a remarkable reproduction of New York in 3 dimensions, where you can go into numerous buildings, you can go down every street, you can swing on webs all over New York, which is the main thing that's fun. And they've done the traversal system, the mechanics for swinging around and jumping and walking up walls and all of that. They've done it all so well that I often found myself ignoring the mini games, ignoring the quest I was on, ignoring where the story wanted me to go, and just swinging around and looking at the amazing views, finding the tallest building I could sit on top of and that kind of thing. It was a lot of fun. The other game, which surprised me, was War Tales. I have an Xbox S and I have a PlayStation 5. So I was playing Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation 5, and on the Xbox S, I have Game Pass, which is basically a monthly subscription. I think it's 13 euros or something. And that gives you access to 250 games that you can download at any time. And they rotate. So every now and then, some game will leave Game Pass and some other games will be added. And one of the new games in November was War Tales. It's a real-time strategy, although, it's not really real-time strategy. It's real-time traveling, turn-based combat, where most of the time you're zoomed out above this landscape and you're controlling a small group of people. And you can recruit different people, make sure they get trained in different skills. I ended up getting very into like optimizing my group, which might be familiar from Baldur's Gate for anyone that's been playing that recently. Quite a different game. I would say not that similar to Baldur's Gate, but similar combat in a way. And a really interesting world with a lot of really interesting little stories in it. And I've been enjoying it. That is the month of November. I hope that November has been good to you. It's been getting really cold here. It snowed for the first time like a week ago, and there's still snow on the ground because it's been below 0 every day since then. I'm not crazy about that, I must admit. I hope maybe it's warmer where you are. Whatever the temperature, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're reading awesome books, and I will see you next time.